In the depths of the Pacific Ocean lies an isolated, mysterious, and wildly beautiful archipelago, the Galápagos Islands. These islands, known for their giant tortoises and unique wildlife, are often described as nature's purest laboratory. Yet, in the midst of this paradise lies a dark story, a tale of human passion, ambition, and tragedy, the tragedy of Floreana Island. Today, we'll uncover a series of mysterious events, unsolved murders, and disappearances that unfolded in this supposed paradise. A story where the dream of rebuilding Eden turned into something far more sinister. This is a true historical mystery, one so bizarre and shocking that reality itself feels stranger than fiction. In the early 1930s, as the world struggled through the Great Depression, a group of European adventurers set out to escape the chaos of civilization and begin a new life in what they believed to be the last earthly paradise. Their destination, Floreana Island, one of the most remote corners of the Galapagos. But what awaited them was not peace or serenity. It was personality clashes, jealousy, and profound isolation. In this story, we will explore how a utopian dream of peace and escape transformed into a dystopia filled with violence, fear, and unsolved mysteries. Those who first step onto Floreana would soon learn, in harshest way possible, that the paradise can be just as merciless as hell itself. Sometimes, the greatest mysteries are hidden into the most remote places, and the tragedy of Floreana is one of them. This is not just a sequence of historical events. It's a universal story that magnifies the core of human nature: ambition, loneliness, fear of exile, and the inextinguishable drive for conflict, even in the most primitive conditions. By examining the disappearances and the deaths on this forgotten island, we will not only attempt to unravel a mystery of the past, but also witness how a small group of people completely isolated from the rest of the world could descend into chaos. This is a portrait of the dark side of a human soul. Welcome. According to Nietzsche, modern man is weak, a being who follows the herd, lives by the values of others, and is afraid to think for himself. After the death of God, meaning the collapse of traditional religious and moral values, humanity, he believed, would fall into a void. To fill that void, a new system of values was needed. The Übermensch, or superhuman, is the one who creates his own values, embraces life with passion, and exerts his will to power. In short, an independent thinker who breaks from the herd, creates his own morality, and gives life's meaning. Nietzsche saw European culture and modern civilization as decaying in descendants. He argued that religious values, especially within Christianity, glorified the weak while suppressing the strong and creative. This gave rise to a negative attitude toward life itself. In modern society, comfort, equality, and herd morality dominate, stifling creativity and the will to power. As civilization advances, individuals do not become freer. They become part of the herd, and values sink to the level of the average person. For Nietzsche, this meant that modern culture was sick, a collapsing civilization. Humanity had lost the power to create its own values and simply followed the crowd. Thus, the Übermensch represents an alternative to this decay, someone who creates new values, asserts their will, and embraces life, shaping the future of humanity. Dr. Friedrich Ritter was a dentist with a deep passion with philosophy. He believed modern society was corrupt and that industrial life had enslaved humanity. He saw his life as an experiment, aiming to prove that a person could survive in nature relying solely on willpower. As you can guess, he was deeply inspired by Nietzsche's ideas of the Übermensch and the decay of civilization. During the 1920s, books about the Galápagos Islands became increasingly popular in Europe. Writers like William Beebe described the islands as an untouched paradise, a perfect setting for those seeking isolation and purity. At that time, the Galapagos belonged to Ecuador but were sparsely populated. Only a few hundred residents, mostly fishermen, and small farming colonies. There had been earlier short-lived settlement attempts by Norwegian fishermen and other agricultural groups. Floreana, compared to the other islands, had something extremely valuable, a freshwater source. It also had a post-barrel system. Letters placed in a barrel by sailors could be picked up by passing ships, meaning it wasn't completely cut off from the world. Through his research, Ritter discovered that Floreana was the most habitable uninhabited island. He and Dor Strauch became the island's first settler. Strauch, a farmer teacher suffering from multiple sclerosis at limited mobility and constant pain. Tired of her monotonous life in Berlin, she saw in Ritter not only a partner but a chance at rebirth. She was more romantic and emotional in nature. Despite Ritter being married, she was determined enough to leave everything behind for him. And in return, Ritter viewed her not just as a lover but almost as a disciple. Because of her illness, Strauch often couldn't resist Ritter's authority. The two became Floreana's first utopian couple. But their relationship wasn't based on harmony, it was built on hierarchy. Ritter's dominance and Strauch's dependence created an imbalance that shaped their lives on the island. For Ritter, Strauch's illness made her perfect companion, a living example of his philosophical ideals. Her background as a teacher made her the chronicle of island life. Observing and documenting events that later became the foundation of her 1936 book, Satan Came to Eden. Though she appeared submissive beside Ritter, her writings reveal a sharp observer who recorded the island's dramas and became a key witness in the conflicts involving the Baroness. Eloise von Wagner Bosquet, better known as the Baroness, was a strangely narcissistic, theatrical Austrian woman, charismatic, manipulative, and hungry for attention. She arrived on Floreana with two German lovers, announcing grand plans to build a luxury hotel called Hacienda Paradiso, which she claimed would attract tourists from around the world. She wanted to be seen as a leader beyond civilization. In Europe, she had lived a scandalous life and longed for an exotic adventure. Her goal was fame and reinvention, to present herself to the media as a conqueror of the new world. Her title of Baroness was questionable. Many sources suggest it was entirely self-invented. Her lovers were Robert Philippson, strong and dominant, and Rudolf Lorenz, weaker, depressive, and increasingly mistreated. Over time, Lorenz became one of the key figures in the island's tragic outcome. Not everyone who came to the island was chasing ideology or thrill. Heinz and Margaret Wittmer, a German couple, sought a simple life. They were not driven by philosophy like Ritter and Strauch, nor by fame like the Baroness. They wanted to build a home, raise children, and live self-sufficiently through farming. Calm, practical, and hardworking, they appeared as the most balanced settlers on Floreana. In early 1930s Germany, economic crisis and the Nazi operation were rising. The Wittmers fled to turmoil to live peacefully and independently. They had heard of Ritter's presence on Floreana, thinking, at least we won't be alone there. When they arrived, Margaret was pregnant and later gave birth to their son Harry, followed by Rolf a year later. Harry became the first European child born in the Galápagos Islands. Rolf Wittmer would later become a pioneer of the Galápagos tourism, founding the Tip-Top ecotourism company, a cornerstone of modern tourism in the islands. Hayes was disciplined and hardworking with a military background, while Margaret was educated, observant, and talented in writing. She later published Floreana, Miss Robinson Crusoe of the Galápagos, documenting the entire story. Though the Wittmers appeared neutral between Ritter and the Baroness, many researchers believe they ultimately benefited most because they were the ones who survived. Perhaps their adaptability and calm nature were their reward. Now, let's move toward the tragic part, or as Scratch herself called it, the coming of the devil to the island. Floreana was small, isolated, and resource limited, scarce fresh water, little arable land, and a rare contact with the outside world. Passing ships, the postal barrel, and infrequent supply drops were the colony's lifeline. This scarcity alone was enough to create tension. The Wittmers focused on survival, pragmatic, family-oriented, and cooperative. Ritter and Scratch lived more ideologically, Ritter imposing strict vegetarianism, medical experiments, and authoritarian decision-making. Their differing approaches to survival planted the seeds of conflict. The postal barrel, vital for communication and supplies, became a tool of control. Whoever managed the barrel could manipulate information, resources, and ultimately power. Both Margaret Wittmer's and Dorothy Scratch's memoirs contain contradictions about the barrel, revealing how this seemingly trivial object became a source of tension and mistrust. When the Baroness and her lovers arrived in 1932, things grew worse. She declared she would build a luxury hotel and turn Floreana into a tourist hub. She dressed in exotic clothing, welcomed visitors, and promoted herself as the island's queen. This infuriated Ritter and Scratch, who had come to escape society, not to rebuild it. Even the Wittmers, though neutral, found her presence unsettling. Soon, the press began covering the Baroness of Floreana. She gave interviews calling herself the Queen of Floreana. Her arrogance only deepened the islands of existing ego clashes. Scratch wrote that the Ritter described the Baronesses as a parasite and a fraud. Even her own camp was unstable. Philippson was dominant, but Lorenz became weak, sickly, and humiliated. Both men initially shared romantic relations with the Baroness, but over time Philippson became her favorite and Lorenz her victim. Rejected and depressed, Lorenz sought refuge with the Wittmers. Meanwhile, Philippson and the Baroness acted like rulers, challenging Ritter's authority. Her charisma and sensuality created magnetic tension among the isolated men. Rumors even suggested Ritter himself was briefly enchanted by her, straining his bond with Scratch. Jealousy, resentment, and unspoken rage simmered beneath the surface. The entire island began to feel like a psychological pressure cooker, like a survival drama where the characters slowly turn on one another. In March 1934, the Baroness Eloise won Wagner Bosquet, and her lover Robert Philippson suddenly vanished. According to Wittmers, the Baroness told them she was leaving for Tahiti and that a yacht would pick them up, but no such yacht ever appeared, not that day nor ever again. After that, only the following people remained on Floreana: Dr. Friedrich Ritter and Dorothy Scratch, Margaret and Hayes Wittmer with their son Rolf, Rudolf Lorenz, the Baroness' other lover, and none of their accounts matched. This disappearance became the turning point, the event that ignited the full Floreana tragedy. The Wittmers insisted the Baroness and Philippson had left with an American yacht bound for the Tahiti, but the story quickly fell apart. No ship records, harbor logs, or eyewitness reports ever confirmed such a voyage, and in the 1930s Pacific, secret travel was nearly impossible. Even more suspiciously, the Baroness had left her passport, clothes, and personal belongings behind. Who would embark on a long sea journey without them? The Wittmer's statements conflicted. Marjorie said the Baroness left in a hurry while Haynes claimed she calmly prepared to go. These inconsistencies hinted at a cover-up. The Baroness had been trying to control the island's water supply. Her disappearance conveniently benefited the Wittmers. There are also rumors of gunfire on the island days before she vanished, and of violent arguments between the Baroness, Philippson, and Lorenz. In such an atmosphere, a romantic trip to Tahiti seemed absurd. After the disappearance, Rudolf Lorenz began acting erratically, claiming that he could no longer stay on the island. He left for San Cristobal Island with a fisherman named Harry Noriega or Nogural, and with that, the potential witness was gone. Floreana was now home to only two families, the Ritters and the Wittmers. The island felt emptier than ever. The Wittmers saw the Baroness' disappearance as divine justice, the end of a tormentor. But Ritter and Scrooge were deeply disturbed. In her diaries, Scrooge described this time as a silent but tense waiting. Ritter grew increasingly paranoid, haunted by the uncertainty and isolation. Though the Baroness was gone, conflict flared once again, this time between Ritter and the Wittmers. Ritter called them ignorant presence unfit to live here, while they saw him as an arrogant intellectual. Disputes over water, food storage, and mail transport escalated. Margaret Wittmer later wrote that Ritter once declared, "I alone must remain on Floreana." He was becoming increasingly unstable. Some accounts suggest Ritter grew jealous of Dor's sympathy for Lorenz. He censored her writings and barred orders constantly. Dor later summed up the situation like this: "There were now only two groups left on the island, the Wittmer's family and me, under Ritter's command." Floreana was no longer a community, it was two hostile miracles locked in silent hatred. For 7 long months after Lorenz's departure, there was no contact with the outside world. The settlers barely spoke. According to Margaret, they even avoided crossing paths at the island's freshwater spring. The Wittmers quietly continued their work, while Ritter and Scrooge sank into psychological collapse. Floreana had ceased to be the island of paradise. It had become an island of deadly silence. 7 months later, on Marchena Island, 2 mummified bodies were discovered, identified as Rudolf Lorenz and fisherman Nagraut. Their boat had apparently been caught in a storm. Due to the dry, hot climate, their corpses were naturally mummified. Reports and newspapers from late 1934 and early 1935 spread to the news widely. American explorer Alan Hancock and his expedition had recovered and publicized the find, reigniting public fascination with the Floreana mystery. The discovery turned speculation into grim reality. The disappearances had now become bodies. For those still on the island, this revelation was devastating. Scrooge's memoirs described their shock and fear vividly, and from that point the question became unavoidable: who was really behind it all? Until the news arrived, the already distant groups on the island had been keeping their distance even more, meeting less often, sharing fewer common tasks, and showing greater division. Scrooge later wrote that the silence was not peace, while the Wittmers, in their own account, claimed they reacted to the situation calmly and rationally. Lorenz's discovery left a deep emotional scar, especially on Scrooge. The possibility of leaving the island with Hancock's ship soon became an option for her and Ritter, marking the beginning of the process that was eventually led to the Scrooge's departure and contact with the outside world. The Wittmer's statement about going to Tahiti and the other testimonies were now being questioned more forcefully. As international press coverage began, the islanders started to defend their own versions of the story with increasing intensity. This laid the groundwork for the accusations and the counter-accusation that would later emerge. The Hancock expedition and the arrival of journalists accelerated the exposure of the events. The discovered bodies attracted the attention of scientific and exploratory ships as well as the media, turning what had once been local gossip into international news. The arrival of the press made the islanders' private conflicts visible, intensifying the tension. The discovery of Lorenz's corpse made the uncertainty surrounding Floreana tangible, immediately worsening the already fragile relationships on the island. Shock, blame, further isolation, and decisions to flee or leave. This became the formula for what followed. The news also transformed the island's affairs from a local dispute into an international sensation, influencing the behavior of those involved and the credibility of their statements. Initially, the Wittmers seemed somewhat relieved as if the threat of the Baroness had been lifted. Yet the growing media attention and the ongoing uncertainties pushed them into the defensive stance, forcing them to justify their actions and version of events. Margaret would spend the rest of her life defending her interpretation of what had happened. For Doris Scrooge, the news was deeply distressing. Her diaries from this period show increasing loneliness, paranoia, and emotional disintegration. Her own writings clearly describe the traumatic impact of these events. For Ritter, the news fueled his anger and sense of alienation. He increasingly felt the erosion of control of the island. A loss contributed to the heightened tensions surrounding his later illness and death. Many sources emphasize the decline in Ritter's mental state during this period. Shortly after the discovery of Lorenz's death and sudden international attention to the island, Dr. Friedrich Ritter fell gravely ill in November 1934 and died within a few days. The official explanation was food poisoning, botulism caused by spoiled chicken or canned meat. Yes, testimonies, delayed rescue efforts, and the absence of an autopsy made this account both suspicious and contradictory. First of all, Ritter was a strict vegetarian, so how could he have eaten meat? Because of food shortages and malnutrition, it was said that a poultry dish or spoiled canned chicken was prepared and eaten. Shortly after the meal, Ritter developed severe symptoms and died within days. On the surface, that seems like a whole story. It was said that the meal had been prepared by Doris Scrooge, Margaret Wittmer, and the others with Doris with suspicion. Once again, these people who already deserted one another were faced with yet another tragedy. The island was isolated and there were no modern forensic facilities. Therefore, no definitive pathology could be performed, making it impossible to prove either accidental poisoning or intent. Although Dor had eaten the same meal and suffered only mild symptoms, her delayed call for help, along with contradictions between her account and the Wittmer's statements, led to conflicting interpretations. Some anecdotes even claim that Ritter, before dying, accused Dor and uttered words like "I curse you." These accounts, however, are based on memoirs and second-hand testimonies. There is no official record. And remember, Dor was also a vegetarian. Her being accused stemmed largely from the inconsistencies in her own narrative. In one version, she said, he ate meat was poisoned. In another, his tongue swelled due to the illness and he couldn't speak. The Wittmers, too, were suspected. They had motives connected to the Baroness affair and their subsequent silence appears suspicious. Some researchers even discussed the possibility of a conspiracy. The Baroness and her lover were gone. Ritter, their rival, was now gone too. The Wittmers consistently supported the food poisoning explanation. This discredited Strauss' reliability but also made the Wittmer's version seem suspiciously well prepared. And yet, how could people who barely spoke to Ritters have known that he ate meat? And his dad, it was the Wittmers who buried his body, and they did not report an incident immediately. Furthermore, Ritter's notebooks, some belongings, and personal letters disappeared. Margaret Wittmer later admitted in her memoirs that they had kept some of Ritter's belongings and even used them in her later books. After Ritter's death, Dorset struggled to survive alone on the island. Medical problems and psychological stress, the trauma of witnessing Ritter's death, limited food sources, and deep isolation all drove her to a breaking point. Having already been considering leaving, she now made the final decision, though requested help from the outside world to leave the island. With the Helen Hancock expedition, she departed aboard the research ship Bellerophon, which had come to Galapagos for scientific and exploratory purposes. After Ritter's death and the Dog-Scratch's departure, the Wittmer family was left completely alone on Floreana. Their daily life revolved entirely around farming, gardening, and managing water and food supplies. With no official authority on the island, they set their own rules and the way of life. In later years, Marjorie Wittmer described this period as creating our own paradise on the island. Not long after Dor's departure, two skeletons were found on the Ecuadorian mainland. They were believed to belonging of missing Baroness von Wagner and Robert Philippson, yet no identification was ever confirmed. Given the era, there was no DNA testing or advanced forensic analysis, so their fate officially remains unknown to this day. Let's move on to popular culture now. The documentary The Galápagos Affair, Satan Came to Eden tells the story of the mysterious disappearances and the tragedies that took place on Floreana Island in the 1930s. It includes scenes based on the memoirs of Dorothy Crouch and Margaret Wittmer and features voice performance by Kate Blanchett and Diana Kruger. The film was released in 2013. Ron Howard's film Eden dramatized the story of these Europeans who settled on Floreana Island, starring Jude Law, Ana de Armas, Sydney Sweeney, and Vanessa Kirby. The film received low IMDb ratings but still worth watching for its cast. One of the key sources we used while preparing our own documentary is Margaret Wittmer's book, Floreana, A Woman's Pilgrimage of the Galapagos, published in 1961. It recounts life and tragedy on the island in great detail. Another important source is Dorothy Crouch's 1936 book Satan Came to Eden, the first-hand account written right after the events. It vividly describes Island's life and includes numerous photographs from that era. Finally, John Trent's 1983 work, The Galapagos Affair, stands as an academic study exploring the settlers' stories and the mysterious events that unfolded on Floreana. You can find links in the description to read Margaret and Dorf books online. Margaret books was translated from German into English in 1990 and is available in the digital archive of the University of Oregon. And so, as we reach end of our video, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like and turn on notifications to catch future uploads instantly. Share your thoughts and the theories in the comments below. The tragedy of Floreana Island is more than the story of a failed colony. It is a reflection of human nature itself, fragile when confronted to isolation, power and desire. Ritter, Scratch, the Baroness and the Wittmers each came here with dreams, hopes and their own visions of utopia. But in isolation, relationships grew tangled, rivalry, jealousy and tragedy became inevitable. Disappearances, suspicious deaths, and missing documents have wrapped to the story in mystery. Each diary, each witness, only giving us fragments of the truth. Today, the island's silence and the few relics left behind remind us of the unsolved enigmas of history. The Floreana Tragedy offers true crime and mystery enthusiasts a rare glimpse into the limits of human psychology, a story of how a pursuit of paradise under isolation can turn into darkness and chaos. We may never uncover every answer, but this tale will always remain a haunting lesson about the duality of human hope and human darkness. Until next time, goodbye.